Today we're going to be focusing on how you can manage vendors using the AADE network event setup. This is something where you can have vendors for your events come into the website and actually pay with a credit card on the website, or they can give you their information, they can register, and then they can print out their invoice and actually send in payment. So it's a pretty seamless process. At the very end, we'll also talk about how after you've set up registration, you can also, if you prefer, provide them with a form that they can fill out, and you can send that to them where they could fill that out, and then they would send it back to you, and you could actually register them on the website if you prefer to control it in that way. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So you'll see we're starting on the landing page for AADE Network. Today we're going to be showing you somebody who is, this is our test case user, Jane Graham. She is logged into the website. But if I was, and in this case I'm impersonating her, so if I was going to go to manage my event, we do have a basic event already set up that Jane had already set up. I would go to the admin button up here, and then I would click on events. And you'll see there's a few event categories in here, and Jane is only seeing what she has access to. And the event we're going to be working on is an LNG event that she had set up. It's called the Channel Island LNG Annual Event. So let me go ahead and click through to that. And you'll see this is sort of the landing page for the back end of her event. It has already been set up. She went through all the event setup and marketing. She went through the event management, set up her basic registration types and prices. And if I go in there, you'll see she has a member, a non-member, and a planning committee. But there's nothing in here yet for vendors. So the first thing that we're going to do is, in this case, we're going to assume that Jane is going to be taking a few different types of vendors at this event, and she wants them to register online. So what I would do, the first thing I would do, again, I would just go to Event Management, and then Registration Types and Prices, which brings us to our current page, and I'm going to add a new registration type. Now, I'm just going to assume that she's going to have 3 different levels of sponsors. And again, you might call it a vendor, you might call it a sponsor, you might call it an exhibitor, you can call it whatever you want. There may be some regulations with CE, so be aware of that when you do your CE application, what you're actually calling these exhibitors or sponsors or vendors. But in this case, we're going to do 3 levels of it. The first one is going to be a bronze, we'll do vendor. And the name of that type can actually, the code can be the same. The code is what you see on reports in the back end. You don't need a GL code because that's all controlled through who you set the event up with in the first place. So in this case, it's the LNG that this is attached to. We don't need to worry about hiding the agenda builder because there's no sessions attached to this, so they won't have to go through that process. Admin only, if I were to check this, that would mean that I have created this registration type, but it is only available to me as an administrator on the back end. So if you were doing something like, if you were doing vendor registrations, but you knew none of your vendors were actually going to go to the website and register, and you wanted to control it all on your end, you could do that this way. But for the most part, it's a good idea to leave it open because it really is easier if you have your vendors go to the website and register themselves and frankly pay with a credit card because then you don't even have to touch it. You can just get the information as it comes in. So for bronze vendor, maximum available, if you do 0, that means it's unlimited. But if you do any other digit, that will cap it at that number. So let's assume that she has 3 spaces available for each type. So I'm going to do 3. Who can register for this type? This, we're going to need to say anyone can register for this type because 99.9% of the time, the vendors who are registering are not going to be members of AADE, so they're going to need to see this on the outside. So we want to make sure that the vendor types say anyone can register. For details, this is just something on the back end for your information. No one will ever see that. It's again purely for your information if you need a reference on here. So I'm going to hit OK. And then we have our first one set up. And then down at the bottom, and you'll probably recognize this from setting up previous registration types, is that you have prices. So I'm going to add a price. And with the vendors, it's usually it's a little bit more straightforward because there's usually not an early bird and a late, so you don't have to segment the pricing. In this case, I'm just going to say the base rate, this is the bronze vendor price. The amount is going to be $100. It could be whatever you determine. We are not going to require a hotel. This is not going to be locked. Start time, we'll say last week. And then the end time, I think I said that this event was happening on the 27th. So let's say this is on the day before, the 26th. And that's when that pricing is going to be valid for this type. So we have 100 right there. Now if you go see and I go look at all registration types, you'll see that I have that one listed here. These buttons, you'll see next to them, it says move up. That's so you can control how these display on the front end. So I'll just start moving these so it's in the order that I want it to be, because generally you want your member type to be first, non-member to be next, any additional attendee types to be next after that, and then vendors listed after that. Because you don't want somebody, not that anyone would, but you don't want anybody accidentally registering as a vendor, but usually they won't because the pricing is too high and they'll notice that. So just quickly, I'm going to add the remaining vendor registration types. And this one's going to be a silver. Oh, cancel. I'm going to make another, on this one, at maximum available of 3. Again, anyone can register as the silver vendor, and I'm going to hit OK. And then I want to add a price for this. I need to call it the silver vendor price, because just so I can see on reports what I'm referring to. This one will be $250, and the same start time and end time on this one. Hit OK. Go look at all my registration types. It automatically moves it again to the top, but I can move these around just so I get it in the right order. And then I'm going to add one final registration type, which will be gold. And again, maximum available of 3 on this. Anyone can register. And hit OK, and then add a price for this. And this one we'll say is 500. Hit OK. Look at all the registration types. Make sure the order is in is the order that I want it to be. Everything looks pretty good there. Now, if I were to take a look at, I'm just going to open up a new tab here so we can take a look at this. The basic registration page. It looks like I started. Let me cancel my registration so I can see what this looks like. Now I'm going to register for this event, and you'll see. Actually, right now we're seeing only the vendors are showing up because the pricing period is those are the only ones that are available right now. I'm actually going to go back to the event and open up these so you can see what it would look like with everyone in there. I'm going to edit the late member registration price so it comes to our current date. We're past our current date. And the same for the non-member. Okay, now if I go back to the registration page and I reload this, it'll show up in the order that I listed everything. So you'll see that I'm logged in as Jane. She's a member for the AADE, so it's going to default to the member price. She could also change it to any of these others. So if for whatever reason she was registering as a vendor, she could click on the one she wanted, and then she could update the price. You can also do discount codes for vendors, just as you do with members and non-members. For instance, that might come into play if you have a nonprofit, and you would do that under event management and then discount codes, and you would simply add a discount code, and this is going to be for a non-profit vendor discount. And the code, it will generate a code. You don't need to leave it. It's that code. It can be whatever you want. And I'm going to copy that so I can remember it. Doesn't need a GL code. What is the amount? The amount is going to be tied to the discount type. So in this case, I'll say I want it to be reduced price to so it's automatically, when somebody uses this code, it's automatically going to reduce the price to whatever I put in here. But you could also do amount off or percent discount off the existing rate. So let's say nonprofits are only paying $50, no matter what kind they are. And for registration types, I want this to apply only to the vendors. I don't want this to get into the hands of anybody else. So I'm just going to highlight, I'm going to hit Control and click on the ones that I want. Bronze, silver, and gold. Only the highlighted ones can use that code now. Start time, it's going to be in 1 day in the past till when registration ends for the vendors. Inactive, if you needed to shut this down for some reason, you could come in here and you could mark it as inactive. Maximum allowed. In this case, I'm going to say 9 because we have 3 vendor types and we can only do 3 each. So let's say no more than 9 can use that. And then hit OK. And then if I were to come in here again, I'm going to reload this one more time. And Jane wanted to be a bronze vendor, but she is with a nonprofit. She could put in that discount code and hit update price, and now it reduces her price to 50. Even if she hit silver and did it again, she would stay at 50. But if she didn't have that code in here and she went to gold and she updated the price, she's now at 500. So this is how it can be controlled. So you would, like, if you were inviting any nonprofit vendors, you would just provide them with that code and just tell them to enter it at the time that they register. So the next step is we have our vendor types in here, we have our prices, we have our discount code. We now want to go to our registration form and get special information on our vendors. So now I'm going to go under Event Setup and Management, and I'm going to go to Registration Form Setup. Now you can see we already have some information in here, which is information that we want for our vendors as well, but we actually need additional information on the vendors. I'm going to show you how you can hide some of this from regular attendees and show it only to vendor types. So you see here we have first name, last name, organization, pretty basic stuff. We need this information from everyone. If there's a little cross in front of it, that means it's required, which you can control by hitting Edit and then checking the required field. So this has all been done in the past. Now I do have one question here that says, what kind of meal do you want for dinner? And it looks like the options are here, chicken, beef, or vegetarian. Now, let's say I don't actually want to ask that question of vendors because they're not going to stick around for dinner. So I don't even want to show this to them. In this case, I would edit this question, and I'm going to limit it to only the people that are actually going to be having dinners, which is members, non-members, and planning committee. And so when a vendor comes in here, they're actually not going to see that. And you see now there's a little asterisk next to the cross or the plus sign. That means that it is a unique question which will show to certain people and not to others. So for instance, if I previewed this page now as a bronze vendor, you would see I don't even see that question. It's not there at the bottom. But if I previewed this as a regular member, you would see I would have the option at the bottom. So it's pretty useful. And the way, now we'll add some questions for vendors. So the first thing, I want to break this up a little bit because the page can get a little long, and I just want it to visually be easy for people to see what's going on. So I'm going to add in the custom fields area, I'm going to add a header. And this is purely for descriptive and visual purposes, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute. And I'm going to say this is the vendor information. You can call this whatever you want. It can just be, this is just going to sort of chunk group together the vendor questions. And I am only going to show this header to my vendors because I don't want regular members or non-members to see this. Okay, so now under that area, I'm going to start adding my questions. So what would I ask a vendor? Well, we have our contact information for our primary registrant, which is the vendor. And assuming that's going to be the person who's on site, that actually may not be the case. This could be somebody in a corporate office in another state. So what we need is we need contact information for the people who are going to be at the event. So now I'm going to add some additional user fields. Or actually, you know what? I take that back. I'm not going to add user fields because if I add those, it'll populate the information of the person who's registering. So let me actually add, or let's test this out. Let's see how this works. Yes. Okay. So it just gave me an error. I actually can't add two of the first name field. So what I'm going to have to do, I'll have to get a little creative. I'm just going to add a text field, and that's fine because we're going to call this something else. So I'm going to find the text fields, which are up in the custom fields, and I'll just add text 100 characters. That's going to give anybody plenty of room to add whatever first name, last name information they need. So I'm going to add a bunch of these, and I can add as many as I want. And we'll change the names in a moment. So you'll know what each field is on your report. So let's say we want to get the contact information of the first on-site person who's going to be there. So I'm going to edit this one and call this first. And I'm not making it required. Or actually, I will make the first one required. And this, again, is only going to be for vendors. Actually, I'm going to change the name of this so I know exactly what the field is. I'm going to say on-site contact number 1. And I'm going to use, you'll see what I'm doing in just a moment. I'm going to use this a few times. So on-site contact number 1, first name. The next field, on-site contact number 1, last name. There's different ways you can do this, but this will make it easier on your reporting when you actually are looking at your Excel spreadsheets to see which vendors are coming. It'll make it a little bit clearer for them, or for you rather. It's only going to be required of vendors. Hit OK. I will make this one required as well. Okay, so we have a first name, last name. You probably don't need as much information on these people, but let's say you can actually ask as much information as you need, but I'm only going to require a telephone number and an email because I'm going to assume that these on-site contacts are actually with the same company as the person who's registering. So your person who's registering, the vendor who's registering, again, it could be somebody in a corporate office. Maybe that's the case. The on-site contact also might be the same person who is registering. So you will get a little variation here. It's just a matter of who's doing the registration and how they deal with it at their office. So edit this one. And I'm going to call this one on-site contact number 1, email. Oh, I should make that one. Only viewed by vendors and required. And finally, on-site contact number 1, phone. Required, only viewed by vendors. So now I want to allow them, if they're bringing another person, I want to allow them space to do that. It's up to you how many people can be present from the company on site. In this case, I'm only going to do 2 options, but you might have 3 or 4, depending on how big your event is and how many people they need to run a booth. But let's break this up a little, and I'm just going to add a horizontal line, and I'm going to need to move it up a little bit to get it under the area we're working with. And now the next one, the next on-site contact information, I'm going to just call this on-site contact number 2, first name. But because not everybody is going to bring 2 people, some may just have 1, this should not be required. But I do want it only to be viewed by vendors. So we'll just do the same sort of thing here. Number 2, last name. Not required, but it's only viewable. This question should only be viewed by vendors. Not required again, but only viewed by vendors. And phone. Not required and only viewed by vendors. Now, if you want to give them a little more context, you can add additional areas. Let's see what this is looking like for a vendor right now. So if I was registering as a bronze vendor, this is what this would start to look like. You'd see I have this required information for the first on-site contact, and then I have the second one. It's a little jumbled together. It's not extremely clear what the difference is. So I'm going to add some descriptive text that will give some context to the person who's registering. And the way that I do that is I'm going to select descriptive text, add it right here, but I'm going to move it up before the second one. And I'm going to edit it. And this is only viewable by vendors. And in this field data, that's where I can add my explanation. And I'll say, you may bring up to 2 people from your company. Please joining you. Okay, so you may bring up to 2 people from your company. Please enter additional contact information below if a second person will be joining you. So now that's going to show up right there. Let's see what this looks like for a vendor. So now it breaks it up a little bit more. It's a little more clear what's going on. I actually, and sometimes when I'm previewing this, I can kind of go back and say, oh, this is working, this isn't working. So I think because a vendor, pardon me, because a vendor would look at this and say, well, I just entered all my contact information. Why do I now need to enter this vendor information? I actually am going to change the name of this header right here so it's a little bit more explicit what this information is for. So let me close the preview, and I'm going to edit that vendor information to be on-site vendor information. And if I wanted to be even more explicit about what this was, I could add some more descriptive text under that and move that descriptive text up. Just make sure you're hitting the right one. All right, so it's got my header right there, and then I'm going to do new descriptive text. And this is going to, again, only be viewed by vendors. And here I'm going to say, if someone else other than if someone else other than the registrant is attending on site, please enter their information. If the information is the same as the also. Okay, so if someone else other than the registrant is attending on site, please enter their information below. If the information is the same as the registrant, please also enter that information. That's a little clunky. You could refine it so it makes a little bit more sense, but it sort of gets the point across why you're entering this information again. You just need to know who's going to be present on site. So that's sort of the beginning of that. That's your main information that you need from these people. However, you can also ask unique questions here for what they need at on-site. So I'm going to add another header because I want to break this up again. And this one, I'm now going to be asking sort of the practical information with the vendor requests. So let me edit that, and I'll call this on-site. And this is not required, it's just a header. All right, and this is going to be just for vendors are going to be able to see this. And now I can start asking questions. So what kind of questions would I ask here? I might ask what kind of table they want. What size table they want. I might ask if they need electricity on site. I might ask if they need internet on site. So let's say I'll ask those exact questions. And I'm going to add, for the first one, for the table size, they will have to make a selection because let's assume every vendor who's coming has to have a table. So I'm going to add a radio button, and I'm going to edit this. And this is going to be, the question will be, table size required. And this is going to be required because we will need to know, everybody has to have one. Again, only vendors should answer this question. The field data, this is where I'm going to give my options. And the format, you'll see, it gives you a selection here. And that's the format you need. So I'm going to just copy this, but then I'll be putting in, and so you should be familiar with this if you've ever created an event before. So 0 is going to equal none, 1 will equal your first option, 2 will equal your second, 3 will equal your third. But I'm only having 2 options, so I'm going to delete that one, and I'm going to replace the X with my first option. So first option is going to be a 5-foot table or a 10-foot table. Now, I should mention here, some people, when they do vendor registrations or on-site exhibitor registrations, they include all that stuff like table size and electricity and internet in the price of the sponsorship or the exhibit fee. So, you know, $500 is a pretty hefty fee. But if you are pricing it out where you're actually charging separately for different table sizes, because as you know, hotels or event spaces where you're having these events, they will charge you for every single thing that you do. If you have additional chairs or tables, for the most part, you're getting charged for it. You're certainly probably getting charged for electricity and internet. If that's not the case and you want to make it simple for them, that's great. But you can actually do this where, and this will be the next step that we show after this, where you can actually separately charge them for each item. I'm going to assume in this case they do need to charge them for the different table sizes. So I'll do a note after the field that says you will be able to select your table size on the next page. You will be able to select and pay for your table size on the next page. But again, if you want to make it really simple and you're not charging them separately because they're already paying a large amount of money, then you don't need to worry about this. This is just for those that want to do an add-on. Okay, so we are asking table size required, and just quickly I will add a simple checkbox on whether or not they require electricity. If they check it, it means they do. This should not be required because checkboxes, if you make them required, it means they have to click on it in order to go forward with their registration, but not clicking on it is it's essentially a no answer. So I'll say this is by clicking here, I am indicating they require electricity on site. Again, you can word that however you want. I'll hit OK. Oh, and I made that for vendors only. And let's do a final one that's going to be about internet. So by clicking here, I'm indicating I require internet on site. It's not required, but I will make it for vendors only. So let's take a look and see what this looks like for one of our vendors. So they've got their basic information up on top. This is what everyone has. And then they have their on-site vendor information, which has a little bit of descriptive text. Their on-site contact number 1, that's required because you have to have someone on site. On-site contact number 2, that is not required because they may not bring a second person. And then on-site vendor request. Table size required. It's going to default to a 5-foot table. That's fine. If they leave it at that, they probably are getting a 5-foot table, but they can change it to a 10-foot table. And then these questions here, by clicking here, I am indicating I require electricity on site, and then by clicking here, I am indicating that I require internet on site. I'll just say I don't need internet, I just need electricity. So this is a pretty basic vendor registration form. But you can make it more elaborate. You can add different questions on here. I'm probably not thinking of every question that you could possibly ask. And really, the questions will be unique to the venue that you are exhibiting at. So other things will come up. But this is just some ways that you can customize things for. You can have one registration form, and you can have all this data on one spreadsheet when people register. So your members are going to be on there. Your vendors are going to be on there. All this contact information is going to be on there. So you can just see everything at once, and it's very handy when you're managing your registration. Let's also take a look at this as a member, so I can make sure that I didn't hit any of those fields. So this is looking good because I'm a member now. I have the basic information that I have to fill out, and then it's asking about the meal that I want, and I'm not missing or I'm not seeing anything that I shouldn't be seeing. So this is working out well. If I wasn't happy with some of the way, because it did look all pretty similar, so I'm going to edit some of this descriptive text, and you'll see I can make it bold, which will help you out because it'll just break up and it'll make apparent what you want people to see. So I made that bold. I'm going to make my other descriptive text bold. You can even change the color or the size of it. But I think making it bold will be enough. And then let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so that works a little bit better because it sort of calls out what this area is for, what they need to do, what's going on. So it's a good idea to sort of use those capabilities in here. So the next thing that I want to talk about is under event management. We talked about doing add-ons for vendors if you're charging them for something, such as table size or electricity. Again, not required, but if you're going to do it, this is how you do it. You go to Event Management and then go to Registration Add-ons. And I did have 2 add-ons that I had added for members and non-members, and I want to make sure that vendors actually aren't going to be seeing these. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this, and it's only available, okay, good. It's only available to members, non-members, and planning committee. I'm going to go back, make sure the other one's the same. Same here, that's great. And now I am going to add a new registration add-on for a 5-foot table. The type is just going to be text. It's just required. The price for a 5-foot table is going to be, let's say it's $25. Again, if it's a low fee, you may not include it at all. The order is just the order in which it appears. The order defaults to this number 255, which if you needed, for instance, if you needed one of these selections to appear before the others, you could sort of order them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and that would determine how it appears on the front end of the website. But if you just want them in here to default how they default, you could just leave the number 255 in here. The maximum orderable, they can only order 1 table, so 1 is fine. Who is this going to be applicable to? Vendors only. Who is this required of? I'm not going to actually require it of vendors, because if I require it, then they will have to order not only a 5-foot table, they'll also have to order a 10-foot table. So it's only available to them, but they are not required to add it. There's an admin-only option on this. If you wanted to do something on the back end where you controlled it, that would be the admin-only option. Block user changes. If you needed to shut this down for some reason and you didn't want people to change anything that they had previously put in, you could click that. I would suggest you don't click it to begin with. The close date and time, you don't need to put one in here, but if there is a close date and time, you can make it the same as when your registration closes. URL, if you were selling something such as a t-shirt that was on another website, you could put the URL in here that would take people to view it. And then details are any details for you that you need to know about this. So I'm going to hit OK, and I want to add another registration add-on, and this one's going to be a 10-foot table. And the type is text. The price is for this one, it's going to be double the price, $50. And they can only order 1. It should only be viewed by vendors. I'm not requiring it of them, though. And then everything else is good, and I hit OK. And then when I go to my, let's see, I need to go back to my registration. I opened up too many windows. Here we go. Okay, let's keep on registering. So in this case, we're going to assume Jane's going to be registering as a gold vendor. She's paying $500. So she hits OK. And then she's got some information in here, but I'm just going to real quickly do some test fields so we can get her registration going. And then she's got to enter all this contact information because she is registering as a vendor. She doesn't have to enter this because she's the only one coming. She wants a 10-foot table. She's going to be able to pay for it on the next page. She will require electricity. She will require internet. And if she goes forward with this, there is a little bit more information about the registrants. Again, this was the second page of the registration. So if I go back to the registration, the back end of the registration page, and I look at page 2 right here, this actually, I can either leave it, and then the vendors would have to answer this question. But if I were to edit these fields and just say this is only going to be asked of members, non-members, and planning committee, that's the way that I could have them skip that. So for the time being, that's why we're seeing that. So I'll just say she's an RD. Just got to give her license number. We did have a guest option on here. Again, if you wanted to go back to the guest options, which was under event management and then guest options, you could make it so this was only available to these types. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to go back a step. And then when I go forward, she shouldn't even see the guest option. See, it just skips it. Okay, so additional registration options. In this case, there was the 10-foot table and the 5-foot table. If I wanted to put a description in there, I could do that when I set up the options. I didn't do it in this case, but you can give a little context for what this is. This is pretty straightforward. I think they'll know what it is. Again, the order is a little funny here, but if I wanted to change the order, that would have been where, let's see, I'm looking at the 10-foot table. So I want the 10-foot table to show up after the 5-foot table, so I'm going to make the number greater than the order number greater than the other one. Oh, what did I not complete? Maybe I need to make it a smaller number. Well, you see, I've run into a little snafu here, which isn't always a bad thing while we're doing a training. So it's not letting me control the order right here, which may have something to do with the order of the other. So let me just, for the time being, leave it in the order that it's in. And then look at all the other. Let me look at the order of these. So that lets me do a 1. So let me do a 2. I think I'll just make them a simpler order, so I know I think that'll hopefully solve this problem. This will be 3. The 5-foot table will be 3. And then the 10-foot table will be 4. There we go. So now when I go to view this, if I reload this page, you'll see the order will have changed because now it's ascending to the highest. So I could either add a 5-foot table or a 10-foot table. In this case, she said she wanted a 10-foot table, so she's going to be charged an additional $50 on top of her $500. Go ahead and hit next, and you will see it breaks out her registration rate, her registration option, which was a 10-foot table. So that's good because you have line items for the company that's going to be eventually paying for this and sending in a check. And then her total, which is $550. Now, if she hit pay, she could go ahead and complete payment online by paying with a credit card. It would run everything right there. She could print out the invoice. It all works. If she wanted to pay by check, it would produce an invoice which she could mail in with the piece of paper. It comes directly to the AADE office. The funds are deposited into your account for your event. So everything works pretty seamlessly. Really, it's great when vendors can pay with credit card. However, I understand that not all companies allow it that way. They have to have the invoice come into the group, and then they have to send it out with it. So the first, probably best option is for them to pay with credit card online because you get that information right away. The second best option is for them to pay by check but have registered online themselves. Probably the third way, which we're going to talk about, which is the least desirable option, but it does happen sometimes, is that if you still want to send out a form that they can fill out, literally write in, and then they can send in a check and send it to their department at their company, and then send in a check to us. That can happen as well, but what needs to happen is that you should first make sure that you've set up your registration form online, and then I'll preview one so we can see what it looks like again. And then if you're going to be creating a paper form that you're sending out to vendors asking them to exhibit with you, you want to make sure that your paper form mirrors this online form. Because what's going to be happening is that you will have, once the form comes back to you once they mail you that information that they have intent to register, or they have a check and they're going to register. You're going to go into the event and actually register them in the event. So you'll enter all this information for them, and where that happens is, let me open one more. I'm going to go to the event home. Oh, did I not go? There we go. And then I'm going to go to the event registration homepage, and you'll see, so Jane's registration is in the middle. She's in the middle of it, so she can either pay for it or she can cancel it. But if Jane were the actual administrator for this event, and she got a paper form in that she sent out to a vendor, and they said, yes, I have intent to register, here's my check, she could actually go in under register someone else, click on that, and then she would put in the information of that vendor. So this will just be hit OK, register as a non-member, because the vendor is going to essentially be a non-member. And then she would select the type that they're intending to register as, update the price, and then she could go ahead and she could enter all that information that they had provided her, and then she would be able to register for them. So it's a pretty good way to keep track of everyone. Like I said, it's this is it's most desirable when you can get them to do it for themselves. But if you need to control it, or they are not able to register online for whatever reason, then you could do the third option, and you could do it all for them. You just need to, if you want them showing up on your registration reports before the event, you need to make sure they get into the system and you're registering them so we can process their payment eventually. The other thing I should mention quickly is that under event setup and marketing, if you wanted to have a section just for your vendors, you could actually add a new marketing page, and you should be familiar with marketing pages. We talk about them pretty extensively in the previous trainings. If you want to go back to those other recordings, you could definitely reference this. But if you added a new page, you could just make a vendors only page, and other people could be able to see it, but this would just have vendor information on it. Vendors, the button, so the full name of it and then the button title. I'll show the event header image, and then it would say, here is my vendor information. Let's take a look and see what that looks like. Vendor information. So if I go to exterior view, see what that looks like. Oh, I need to add the button for this actually. Let me go back. So up here, I now have the button available to me, and I need to add the button for the page. It's thinking. So now it's there. Now if I preview it again, you'll see I see vendors are right here. Again, the order is a little out of whack, so I want to go back again, and I want to make sure that oh, no, sorry, this is the wrong spot. I want to make sure that the order is actually in the order that I want it to be. So this will be, details will be 0, speaker materials will be 1, vendors will be 2, and so on. So now it's going to show up in the order that I want it to show up. There we go. So I got the first button, second button, third button. Registration button will always be the last button. So I could switch between the different information I have here, and then I could put any special vendor information in here. I can have another link to the registration page just so vendors, they knew they were going to the right place. I would list the rates here, my cancellation policy. If I had any special handouts for vendors, I could put it here. Yeah, there's a ton you can do with this. But if you do have questions about more on marketing pages, or how to fill out that information, please refer to the previous recordings. As always, if you have additional questions, you can contact us, mynetwork@aadenet.org. That's mynetwork.org. work@aadenet.org. If there's anything that wasn't covered in this, please feel free to email us. And thank you for joining us today.